and welcome to Critical Intelligence. Today we'll be discussing Putin and his recent interviews that he gave to Vesti, which is, government Russian-backed channel, pertaining Russia's further interests and advantages within the former Soviet bloc. In an interview, he was clear saying that Russia needs to be resurrected as an empire. He just hasn't used those words exactly, but he stated even before that Russia needs to have their Russian lands back because he claims during Soviet Union the borders have been changed and certain areas were amalgamated and more lands were added. Therefore, he believes it's time that those nations give back. You should be noticing there's a lot of unrest going on right now too. Recently, last week, Wagner Group members were arrested in Belarus. Lukashenko claims that they were there to cause a disruption and possibly another Maidan like in Ukraine. However, Maidan in Ukraine was not backed by Russia. They were just supporting Yanukovych, who ended up going back to Russia anyways after, because he had to basically go in exile with everything that occurred. Nevertheless, the recent events, Lukashenko today gave a big speech fearing that Russia is trying to interfere in Belarusian elections. However, just for the fairness of it, Lukashenko jailed both of opposition candidates. Therefore, they automatically became ineligible for the election. One of the wives of the candidates is actually running, and this is how this is such a surprising move. Nevertheless, adding the fact that Kiev had a hostage situation just yesterday occur. The individual seems to be Uzbekistani national, but at the same time it was a very odd situation right downtown Kiev. Also, last week there was hostages taken outside of Kiev, but it was still in Ukraine and still unknown. So there's two within a week, which is very odd because Ukraine is not known to have such hostage situations back to back, and especially with not even Ukrainian nationals or even Russian Uzbekistani. So clearly, it's more than likely, outside of being mentally disturbed, somebody radicalized him or paid him to be involved in some type of disruption for Ukraine, especially with everything going on. So now added that, and Zelensky losing his numbers as far as favoritism concerned, so this is creating a turmoil. Belarus is in turmoil. There's also renewed conflicts back and forth between Armenia and Azerbaijan. That conflict has been in Nagorno-Karabakh, has been going for such a long time. Obviously, Turkey is backing Azerbaijan because, number one, they both share Islamic faith. Also, the history that Turkey caused genocide for so many Armenians. Even France recognized it, but it continues to be an issue. Erdogan turning Sofia into a mosque again, even though originally it was an Orthodox church. So there's a lot of different turmoil going on. However, let's look specifically from the Russian perspective. Belarus plays both sides of the fence. In one way, Lukashenko wants to be close to Russia and even signed agreements where, the banking system is now shared with Russia and it's a unified system. The border checkpoints also share a unified system with Russia. So basically, it's one giant border, just, but Belarusians are stuffing the other side, but it is automatically the same system. Also, at the same time, if you're looking in a post-Soviet space, Donbass is technically a loss for Putin, given the fact that in the long run, the conflict continues, the region is destroyed, the coal export that is one of the known regions, it continues to have problems, and it still has not been resolved. The state is in dire need, even though DNR is advocating for Donbass to join Russia and the region. Russia is expediting passports for the nationals in order to use the clause in the constitution that if they ever need to go in there, they would be actually protecting so-called Russian citizens now. But at the same time, Putin said many times he's not interested for the region to becoming part of Russia. But, just an autonomy status like Chechnya possibly. But again, who can trust Putin and what he says? At the same time, the biggest thing that a lot of these nations are going through is nationalism and identity. As far as it's great that they are starting to develop its own nationalistic ideas away from Russia. But at the same time, during the Soviet Union, the Russian influence was so large that there's still a lot of Russian-speaking individuals and Russian background people living in these republics, and a lot of them are actually liking and supporting communism and even saying that they like Stalin, even though that's considered to be very odd, but still they're glorifying the past and how the communism used to be based on certain situations. It's, for example, Baltic republics has always been on the western side. It was horrible for them to be part of Soviet Union. However, Baltic economies are very small, so a lot of Russian speakers, even there, some of them still kind of favors the whole Russian incentive, but that's not so much there. Georgia is clearly leaning towards the West. They support NATO missions. They just had soldiers arrive in Afghanistan to support the peacekeeping there. There's also joint ventures with Israel producing defense equipment that is being sold to Saudi Arabia and even Yemen. So that is still more of the Western alliances versus, what is Russia affiliated with and Russian defense and weapons trade even. The main factors too is the influence of former Soviet republics. In the past 3 decades, the illusion of Russia owes everything. The illusion was hammered into people all 7 decades. Because now, in a way, they're like, okay, well, during Soviet Union, Russia took from these republics and now Russia owes them. Well, at the same time, it was give and take at the time. So during Soviet Union, everybody got taken because during 1917 revolution, all the Russian lands were taken. Communists killed Romanov family, and they pretty much ruined everything, and all the elites were pretty much either sent to exile or murdered. So I mean, if you start going into owing, you can look at from the Russian populist perspective, they almost became victims as well, even though clearly I'm not advocating what Putin is doing, because I think he's pretty evil. And it's also naive to think that Putin will ever give Ukraine to Europe, because it continues to be a buffer and bordering to Russia. Ukraine will never be given freely to the West, and same as Russia will never give Central Asia to China. It will just never happen. China can push their limits. They can even have some of the Chinese citizens migrating towards the Russian side in the northern parts of Russia. This has been happening quite a lot. Well, not now when the borders got closed since March and the coronavirus pandemic, but prior to that, they were slowly migrating and encroaching. However, Russia keeps tight control over that because, they're almost trying to make it another Chinese city or republic, especially outside of Khabarovsk. And, Putin will never go for that. They'll give them a leeway for a minute, but it's not going to go anywhere with that. At the same time, if you look at the independent authorities of sorts everywhere from the former republics, the impression on the Kremlin's toothlessness and that they're weak is not actually true, but there's actually a run on fear because of the way Putin conducts himself. Russia, as of late, constantly shows off their new military might, true or not, but the new equipment is glorified and how it's nuclear powered and can take the whole world. But at the same time, a lot of it fails. There's a lot of incidents involved. This is a lot of grandstanding going on. At the same time, if you purely look from a Russian strategy, the constitution amendments were just passed in July, which obviously everybody knew they would, because the majority of Russian populace did not even know what they're voting for. It was all yes or no question on the ballot without explanations. There were so many points, and even all those points were not even fully disclosed or even interpreted. So they just said yes, and that pretty much allowed Putin to be almost a lifetime leader in a way, even though the election farce, I'm sure, will continue for a while, just to show the populace that they have some say in everything. Also, looking at it from a different other perspectives, is that as of late, Russia seems not favoring China as much, but yet, like yesterday I was talking about, they're creating additional labs, and like Wuhan, China is adding 7 more, Russia is adding a few more between Russia and China border. So that is a little bit, in one, somebody could say it's basically to contract each other. In another way, it's a united effort, and it could be a lot of different things. And lastly, if looking at the latest interviews that conducted with Putin this week, it almost looks like the plan is for the next 2024 agenda, which is 4 years from now, is to have at least 3 republics under Russia. So which republics would they be? Because it was hinted that there's going to be few that will want to go back and join and back Russia. It was not used, the words were used a little bit different, because obviously that's not the verbatim Putin was using, but it was implied. So the question is, which ones would be? My guess would be Belarus. Ukraine is still half and half on the border, unless Ukraine completely collapses and the western part of Ukraine and eastern separate, and western part by itself would be too weak to be in a nation and would almost have to join Poland like originally was, especially Lviv and that region. So that could be a possibility, but I don't see it. Armenia, possibly, but that's hard. Moldova, that's a possibility, but then even again. So the question remains, and I would like for everybody to comment on this too if you could. Which republics do you think that Putin is eyeing to join by 2024? Because clearly it's not going to be all of them back, especially Baltic states. It's not going to be Georgia. So which republics do you think, like, Uzbekistan? But I mean, even then, like, what republics do you think will actually go back to Russia or create some type of deal within and create some sort of union within themselves? So please comment and make sure you press like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks again and see you soon.